Welcome to the Boaters Podcast. Today we're hanging out with Keith McGowan from McGowan Marine. I can't talk now that we're recording, but he's up in New Jersey. And to start the show off, Keith, we want to know, what was your first boat? And then more importantly, what was your worst experience that you could think of with that first boat?
Interesting question. My first boat I fell in love with that I bought was an 18-foot Hydrosports center console, 1980 boat, Kevlar, right? For anybody that knows the old Hydrosports. Solid boat. It was owned by a plumber, and it had an 85 horse 79 Johnson on it. And I didn't have too many bad experiences. I owned that boat for 22 years, but the first experience I had was I went to check the lower unit oil because I got a Select manual and read. I was 18 years old, right? So I wanted to read and understand how to take care of it. I was a small engines mechanic at a lawnmower and locksmith shop at the time. So I'm reading, should be no moisture in the lower unit. And I took the plug out, 2 drops of water came out. Rest was nice, clean, fresh oil, which I know now is probably fine. But I went, here was my first mistake, Aaron. I said, I better take this to someone that knows what they're doing.
Oh, so your worst experience was you had to shell out a lot of money because you didn't know something.
So you know how they say sometimes you win and sometimes you learn?
Mm-hmm.
So the learning usually costs a lot. So I paid a guy to do the seal. It was probably end of September. I took it out one time, ran fine, put it away, but I didn't check it before I put it away for the season. Number one mistake.
Oh, no.
In the spring, when I went out, ran all day, no problem. Told my buddy, hey, meet me over at the boat ramp, and I'm shooting across the bay, and it's just the engine slowing down, like it's seizing up. And at 18 years old, I knew what it sounded like to seize an engine from dirt bikes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So just got it up on the ramp and put it in neutral and locked up. But I was fortunate enough that a local Marine guy that I talked to on the phone said, hey, maybe it's your lower unit. That shaft goes straight up into the crankshaft.
Mm-hmm.
Dropped the lower unit, fired up the motor, took a deep breath, and then had to buy a used rebuilt lower unit because that one was no good and out of warranty. It was a season later.
Wow. That's interesting because, my first boat was totally different. I did not keep mine for over 20 years. So for first boat to last that long, like that's really good. You're getting your money's worth out of that boat, at that point in time.
Well, it was my fun projects. I had twins on it. I had twin 3-cylinders on it. I had a 175, a 200. I would just play with it, and then ended up selling it at one point because after I got married, I actually put it away for about 5 years when I got married, had a child, had some other expenses. And then my wife wasn't comfortable in the center console because she doesn't swim very well. So that's when I bumped up to the 23-foot boat. And that was a whole rebuild project, transom, stringers, everything. So.
Oh, so you got the 20, you said 22 years out of that one?
Yeah.
Out of the Hydrosport? That's a long time. And then went into a complete restoration project with a transom, fiberglass, all that stuff. Most people don't go from a good used boat and like having fun with it to, I'm going to rebuild a boat and cut the transom out and take on a full project like that. So that's kind of funny. Now,
I am like that. I have no problem taking on something, and doing that. Now, I wouldn't do it again right now because, time and money is different as you get older, right? But I bought the boat for $1,000 and, got a couple of twin Yamaha 115s, 1991s I put on it and ran that boat for another 10 years and then sold that. So
nice. Now the 23, what was that?
It was an 86 Wellcraft. It wasn't the Sportsman. It was like the Sportsman style.
Mm-hmm. That would be, was it still the center console or was it the dual console one?
It was the walk-around cab.
The walk-around. Yeah. That's nice. See, I like a Wellcraft ride. I had a 20-foot Wellcraft, but I think for the most part, most Wellcrafts that I've been on, they ride really well.
It was different going from the 18 bouncing around, and plus I was getting a little older, so I liked the little more comfortable ride, a little bit more to trailer, but my wife and I had it down to a science of getting in and out of the boat ramp. So it was great running for many years.
That's awesome. A quick word from our sponsor this week being you, everyone that has purchased any merch from the BornAgainBoatingShop.com store, as well as all of you that are part of our Boaters program, which now has a school community. This includes hundreds of videos that are not on YouTube teaching you all kinds of skills about your boat, as well as a weekly questions and answers live stream. You can check that out at BornAgainBoating.com, or you can click the link in the description and click join now. Out of curiosity, I've never been to New Jersey. What you would think when I think of up north, I think of a lot more inboards and stuff like that, but you're talking about, well crafts and hydro sports. So it's like, are there more center consoles and outboards where you're at, or like more inboards? What kind of a ratio is?
I would say there's more. So it depends on where you go. If you go down to Jersey Shore and you go to some of the finer marinas, you're going to have long center consoles with at least twin, triple, quadruple outboards on them. But when you go to the local boat ramp, the State Marina boat ramp, those are guys that are running the older Boston Whalers, the Makos, the Grady Whites, the Hydro Sports, because they're keeping them out on the water, and they've got two strokes on them. Some of the guys have some four strokes here and there, but there's still a lot of them old 80s, 90s two strokes out there cranking.
That's interesting because those are all the main Florida style bow brands, Grady White, Mako, Wellcraft. Those are Hydro Sports. That's all that's what you see down in South Florida. So I'm surprised to hear that that's what's up there. And so there's not a lot of inboards, you would say.
So I would say over the years, it's probably down to about 10 or 15% inboard outboards or straight inboards that are at the shore at the marinas. But you go out to the lakes, and I'd say there's probably still 40% of the IOs that are out there because they last so much longer on the fresh water.
As far as your outboards go, you guys mainly, would you say it's more Mercury land or Suzuki land, or,
It's Yamaha, man.
It is Yamaha's.
Yamaha is number one, whether it's four-stroke or old two-stroke. I would say it's kind of tied for number two with Suzuki and Mercury.
Okay.
Because Suzuki is such a good value for what you get for it.
100%.
But Honda is making a really strong, the past 10 years, I've had guys ask me, if you had whatever money you wanted for I got a buddy of mine around the corner, has a Bayliner, walk around 21 foot. What would you put on my boat? And I said, I'd buy a Honda, man. If you got the money. Everything I've ever worked on that's been Honda has been great running engines. And that's what I would do. So that's what he did, and he's been running it for a couple of years now. So
that is awesome. I was actually just talking about that a week or so ago, about how Honda is really I don't think that they really put into their marine division what they do into everything else. Because when you think about Honda, I've said this on this podcast a couple of times about, if you look at anything, their cars, their lawnmowers, or any other thing that Honda makes, is they make everything, but they're always really, really good. They're always top of the line, really good. And then when you look at their outboard division and their marine, it's kind of they're down here as far as market share. So I was saying, I really wish they did do more. I know last year they came out with that BF 350 and that kind of stuff, and they're making that boat with Scout. So that's interesting to hear that they're making that much of an, insurgence up there and actually getting, more popular. That's
right.
good.
Yeah. What it comes down to, Aaron, as I'm sure you've experienced, is reliability. And that's what people are looking for. Some of the original two-stroke or four-strokes that Yamaha had their corrosion issues, it turns people off quickly. And then some people that had the Suzukis where the plug would pop out and you'd try and weld a plate over it, where the sensor was supposed to go. And, not that I've ever tried that.
No.
But, and then they feel burned, and then they want Honda because they know how reliable Honda is. So it all depends on how people, come into it and what their experiences are too.
That's surprising that it's not surprising. I'm not surprised at all that Suzuki is neck and neck with Mercury up there. You didn't say anything about Evinrude, because I would imagine there'd be a bunch of those old Evinrudes running around up there too.
They are. So again, if you go to the local, I would say state-run boat ramps where you're not paying a huge fee to use the ramp. It's probably not the greatest ramp in the world, but the guys who are on a budget, like I was for many years, they're still running those old Evinrudes out there, and some of them are from the '70s. You go to the lakes, and there's some '60s, '70s Evinrudes that are still running out there. That guys are they're gonna run till they're dead, you know.
Then you'd probably say that there's a pretty high majority or percentage of two strokes out there still running compared to like newer four strokes. You said that the local ramps, the state ramps, that by and large most of them have two strokes. So I'm guessing
Yep.
that that's still ruling the water over there.
Yeah, most of the smaller boats and older boats that guys are on a budget are still running the two strokes because they're easier to maintain. You can do a lot of the repairs yourself. And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of mechanics, I'm sure you've come across, as soon as there's a computer on it, they kind of shut down. They don't want to get into it and try to figure out what's going on or do any research. So,
Yeah.
carburetor, mix my fuel in my tank, and I'm off and running. Who cares if it smokes and spits and sputters and stalls every once in a while? I always
Mm-hmm.
get out and I always get back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as them being able to last that long up there is, yeah, as long as you feed them that, the only downside is the fuel economy.
Yep.
They're gonna drink fuel, they're gonna drink oil, but they're still running. So, why would
Yeah.
you replace something that's running with a 10, 20, $30,000, new thing that doesn't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. And let's face it, how many weekends you're in Florida, right? I had a good
Mm-hmm.
friend of mine. He was so we were so close with fishing that every Saturday morning was standard order. He met me at my house at 5 a.m. I was already in the truck with the trailer ready to go, and we
Mm-hmm.
went every weekend. He moved down to Florida, bought himself a boat, and said, "Keith, it's great down here. Everybody puts their boat away in November," and he kept his boat out because it's not cold for him. Whereas here, how many times are guys actually getting out on the water per season in New Jersey?
I don't know.
So
What do you guys have? Like 12 weekends, 3 month? What is the season in New Jersey? 3 or 4 months?
for the for me, the fair weather boater, right? The cold, I pack my boat up every September, you know.
Okay.
But we got fishermen, and when I first started McGowan's Marine 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I said, well, I'll do some of these, and I'm doing winterizations, and I tell my wife, well, November it's going to start slowing down. In December, yeah, it's got to start slowing down. I had guys wait until January to winterize their boat because they're out striper fishing, man.
Wow. That seems pretty brave because at any point in time you could have a cold snap and you get, down into the low negatives or the low teens and all of a sudden, well, if everything's still mainly an outboard, if you just trim it down, all the water leaks out. So you don't have
Right.
that much of a concern, but December, early January is
Ooh,
pushing it on the winterization scale
I'm telling
and
you,
I don't
Aaron,
even live there.
it surprised the heck out of me. I was like, "Hey, you're still out fishing. That's fine with me." But I'm packing up my Chevy Tahoe with all my winterization stuff to go out, and I'm cold doing it. I can't even run the hose at the guy's house to do the winterization.
Yeah,
So,
that's too
uh,
funny.
yeah, it is. It is. It's amazing. But I would say the large majority, if they get out 8 times a year, they're happy because not every weekend has good weather either.
That's true. That's true. And out of 8 and 10, so on average, if you're getting out 8 to 10 weekends, and let's say you run 8 hours the boat, you're only putting like what, 70, 80,
Yeah, it's maybe 70, 80
maybe?
hours a year. And how
Yeah.
much how much fuel are you really burning? You know, and
Yeah.
some of the guys that I helped out with their motors over the years that upgraded, right? I always did boat evaluations every time they would upgrade. And if
Mm-hmm.
they start going out deeper, so to do a canyon run they like to do out here in Jersey, it's about a 50, 60-mile run. So those guys, they're going to the four strokes because they're
Mm-hmm.
burning fuel all the way in and out. But the guys that are fishing around Sandy Hook in New Jersey, right across Sandy Hook is New York Harbor, and there's stripers around the Statue of Liberty almost all year long.
Oh,
Um,
wow. So,
and
yeah, you don't have to go far then.
Yep, you're really just, you get up on plane to where you want to go, maybe 10, 20 minutes. Every once in a while, I would go out around the hook to the ocean. I had a couple spots where I would chum for bluefish because they're just fun to catch. They're not
Right.
not really good to eat, but they're fun to catch. And maybe I'd run for 40 minutes to get out there and back. And if I had a 100-gallon tank and burned 30 gallons, it was a lot. So
Hmm. That brings into that for me because I deal with, in Florida, people are doing, they're running their boats throughout the week, even on the weekends. They're starting them up. They're, burning through fuel. But if you've only got 8 to 10 weekends, and let's take, you were saying a Mako. Let's say you got a Grady White or a Mako, you got a 100-gallon tank of fuel. Well, if you're only using it 8 to 10 times and putting, let's say, 3 hours on each one of them, how many tanks of fuel are you really burning? Are you burning, you're getting a full tank of gas and it lasts in 3 years or so? Like,
yep.
I mean,
Number one problem, and I'm sure you've seen it too, but in New Jersey, when they don't get used enough, is the absorption of that water into the fuel that causes
oh
so
yeah, if
many
you're using
problems.
ethanol, yeah.
Yep, can't get away
hmm
from it here in New Jersey. So
You've also got, your winter blended fuels and your summer blended fuels too.
yep,
So, I always get that. That one's something that always trips me up. I can never remember the winter they put kerosene in the gas.
yes, yep.
Okay.
All of
Yeah.
these
So,
things, and all of these things just make it not burn as well. That's what it comes down
yeah.
to.
Yeah. Especially when it's 2 to 3 years old.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and I
but,
loved your video that explained when it evaporates in the carburetor, what's left over there is what the problem is.
mm,
So if you have 2 weeks, it could sit for 2 weeks, you not use it, and then it doesn't run right when you're out. It's definitely that moisture causing that problem.
yeah. And that sucks because you would, now how available is non-ethanol fuel in the New
It's
Jersey area?
it's not. You have to go into Pennsylvania to get it. Can't get it in New
Really?
Jersey. Yeah,
And
so
is that
we're
like a
very.
state thing or?
It is. The last I heard, there was one up in North Jersey, and I heard it closed because it was up near Lake Greenwood Lake, which is goes from New Jersey to New York, and it was the last one that was available. So guys aren't going to drive 2 hours to top off
Yeah.
their tanks. What
No.
guys do though is they'll go to a local small airport before the winter,
Get
and they'll get some.
avgas.
Yeah, they'll get some of that, put it in a 5 gallon jug, stick their fuel line in it, and just run the motor for a while so everything
Mhm.
gets inside there for the winter. So
That's a pretty common thing around here too, is to put, 5 gallon, get some av, because avgas is like, I want to say it has like a 2 year shelf life or something like, I mean, it's a lot more. And then also, if you're not talking about ethanol blended fuels and we're talking about straight unleaded, to me, I've always found it surprising because all the problems that you have with the fuel is the ethanol. It's the moisture, it's the corrosion, it's all that stuff that goes bad, and then when it evaporates, you're left with all these problems. Unleaded gas, like non-ethanol gas or avgas, doesn't have any of that stuff in it.
yep,
So yeah, your gas might evaporate, your octane level might come down a little bit, but it, 2 to 3, 4, 5 year old unleaded, straight ethanol free or avgas, it's still burnable. Like, it's not like,
yeah,
you're gonna have this massive problem. It's just
right.
you got low octane, and
Yeah,
obviously you don't
well,
want to be.
it's amazing you say that because when I was a kid back in the early 80s working at a lawnmower shop, when the gas
Mm-hmm.
went bad, it stunk. It didn't have ethanol in it. It would turn into the thick, thick varnish, and someone would roll in their snowblower because that's what sat the longest of their machine over the long summer months before winter comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I would come home, my clothes would just stink of that bad gas. And now we don't have that anymore. It doesn't go bad that way. It evaporates, and the moisture that's left over causes all those problems.
Yeah, I wonder. It must have been in the refining process, or maybe something that they did to it. I mean, I don't know why it would change, but I know I've seen I've seen boats in Florida that have non-ethanol fuel in it, 4 or 5 years old, and light it up and drive
Yeah.
off. Like,
Yep.
it's now you get ethanol in there. That's totally different topic. It is not.
Yep.
It does not work like that.
Yeah, man.
You don't do that.
And you can't separate it once it's done. It's done. Can't
Uh huh.
can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
No, you can't. What? So you said Mako, Grady White, Hydro Sports. What would you say the most popular bow brand up there? I would. What would
If
you
I had to
say?
guess, Chaparral, Crown Line.
Okay.
They're kind of big at the local marinas where you've got some people with some more money who have some, I would say 30 foot, 28 to 30 foot larger boats.
Mm-hmm.
And it used to be those were all twin IOs, the Volvo Pentas and all that stuff. The Topaz is another popular one. Bertram was for many years, as well as Egg Harbor, because of course Egg Harbor is made in Little Egg Harbor, New Jersey. So the Egg Harbor boats were big. But all of that is really when all those boat manufacturers switched and OMC bought a boat manufacturer for a while and Bayliner changed and all that stuff. They all kind of consolidated and we came out. The market was flooded in the 90s with like Imperial and all these kind of starter boats that
Mm.
were really very low quality boats for many years.
Yeah,
You know.
production line. They were just slinging them.
Yep. Yeah, my dad bought a Imperial, and the stringers from the motor all the way up to the front just rotted right out in 3 years.
Wow. I mean, they must have had something that was just, it didn't get glassed properly and the stringers were wood that it just was
Or
able
who
to
knows
eat.
what type of wood they actually really used in that.
Maybe termites.
They'll eat it
Yeah.
up quick, man.
Yeah. Chaparral. So, because when I think of a chaparral, I'm thinking inboards, but now, a lot of these brands that used to be known for being a lake boat, bow rider, Regals, chaparrals, a lot of the Sea Rays and stuff, they've got a lot of models now that are all outboards compared to
Yeah,
the inboards.
yeah.
So,
Years ago, my old boss used to have a Chaparral because that was his ski boat, and it was a center engine, straight inboard, and that was his ski boat. He loved it. And over the years, he eventually gave in and got a four-stroke outboard on his final boat that he had when he went into retirement. He
hmm.
swore he never would. He said, "I don't like that noisy thing on the back. And but when you start up that four-stroke, man, it's really it changes you.
Oh yeah, you get spoiled because you're like you can't smell it. And then also you can't. You're like, is that thing running back there? I don't like, hit the starter and like hit the flag. Oh man, it is running. Like, oh no,
Yeah. And you know
yeah,
what's
no, they've
cool,
come a
Aaron?
long way.
Yeah. So what's cool, Aaron, is I started rebuilding some four strokes. I did a lot of rebuilds over the years, and I
Mm-hmm.
had this great old machine shop guy, really tough guy to get to know. He's kind of rough around the edges. Some of these guys are.
Oh yeah,
And
yep.
when I first met him, he wouldn't even look at me. But I kept coming back and asking questions. And one day he brought me in the back and he just shared so much with me. So my first four stroke, because I'd have my own boring bar and everything here. And I said, look, I want to bring it to him, get some advice. I'll pay him to even do it just to listen and learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He says to me, I'll tell you what, give me the crankshaft. He puts it in the V block. He says, I'll make a bet with you. If this crankshaft is straight, I'll rebuild it for free, whole motor. If it's crooked, you pay me double. And I said, no bet, no bet. So you'd be amazed if you start putting these newer engines, they're just not dialed in the way the old ones were. So I
Hmm.
did this rebuild on this 140 four-stroke. I think it was a 140 Suzuki for a guy. He brought it to me in a basket case, all apart. Yeah, and I actually bought another one and videotaped myself tearing it down so that I wouldn't miss anything putting it back together.
Right.
Got it back together, and he called me like a week in. He goes, Keith, what did you do to this motor? I'm thinking, oh man, what happened? I keep turning the key to start the thing. It doesn't move. So when you straighten these cranks, these things run even smoother after the rebuild sometimes. And it's an
Oh.
it's an amazing thing you discover when you bite the bullet to take on some of those projects like that.
Hmm. See, I didn't even. You don't. We don't rebuild a lot of engines down here. They pretty much people. There's so many used that are available, and then people keep them until they're wrecked, and then when they're wrecked, they buy another one. No, they don't.
Right.
It's just to them because you don't have an off season. Like up there, yeah, you got 8 months of time to figure it out, tear the engine down, put a new crank, do all this stuff to it. Whereas down here, it's like, no, I got family coming in town, or I'm doing this, I got that. Like I'm trying to use my boat. Like I'm not trying to spend 2-3 months rebuilding this engine. Just I'll just go buy another one for a couple grand and slap it on there.
Yep.
What
Yep.
what engines would you say would people should stay away from if they're buying like a used engine that you've had to do the most rebuilds on, something like that?
So I would say everybody talks about the old Evinrude Ficht motor,
Mm-hmm.
and They did have several models that if they were taken care of, maintained, and the little idiosyncrasies like the EMM's cooling systems and the oil pumps, if those were taken care of, they were strong, running, smooth, efficient motors. But
Mm.
if someone's looking to buy, it's interesting you say that because just was on the phone a couple nights ago with a guy that contacted me and bought my used outboard motor buying guide. And what he did was he said, "Listen, I just bought this boat. It's got 2 Evinrude fix on it. I just got a deal on it because nobody wants the boat because of the motors."
Yep.
So
I
he's like,
heard that
"Should I?"
story before, I heard that.
So
Yep.
he says, "Should I run it?" And I said, what do you have to lose?" I said, "But do the thermostats, go through the cooling system, all those tubes get plugged up if it sat for a period of
Mm-hmm.
time. You know, your EEM, make sure those tubes, take a little, I take a little squeeze ball with water and squeeze it through, make sure it's flushed properly, and do all those little things, and you'll probably run fine for many years. Why not use it until it dies? You can always slap new motors on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you can keep it running, it's kind of like you got to come up with a budget that you're like, okay, pricing out a used engine, I can replace these with something used for 6 grand. Okay,
Right.
so if 6 grand is your number, you kind of look at what are the repairs you got to do, and if you got to spend more than say four, you're almost at the point you need to just don't put that four into those because you're throwing good money at bad. But
Yeah, it's time
we
to move
used
on.
we used to do this on Optimaxes that you'd run in lakes and stuff. There was a screen for the cooling in
Yep.
them that you'd have to pull that screen out and always get clogged with grass and stuff. But some people, we would add filters to the hoses going there they could pull the cowling, pull that filter out, shake all the
Interesting.
grass out, put it back in. So on a FICT, I'm thinking, because I'm thinking of a way to make it, say someone like you said has these engines, something you could do to make it last longer, like putting a screen in before your EMM to catch any grass so it doesn't clog up and overheat your computer.
Yeah, so when you get creative with things like that, you can really make these engines run a long time. So the other brand I would think of was the two-stroke Suzukis. They were good running
Mm.
motors when they ran well, but getting parts for them is getting more and more difficult. So and when you buy them, you are paying an arm and a leg for those parts because they know it.
Yeah. There's only
So
10 left in the world, so you got
and I'll have guys send me pictures and, okay, what do you think of this motor? And they've got the head off, and I don't know why I'm getting water in the cylinder. And you see that aluminum around the outside of the sleeve is so badly pitted. And you just say, hey, guy, come on. When it's that far gone, you don't need to be investing anymore in this.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's time to pull the plug on that one. I'm
And you can do
surprised you
JB
didn't.
Weld. You can do a JB Weld and maybe get through a season, but
Mhm.
eventually it's going to pop off and end up in your cooling jackets. And how do I know that? And
Hand up
you know,
accountability there.
that's what
That was me.
happens.
JB Weld's actually pretty amazing stuff. I mean, it depends on what you're working with, but like for like cooling and stuff like that. I mean, when you think about it in your cooling systems, a lot of people kind of dog on JB Weld, but it has some really good uses, and especially on cooling systems where your water pressure is like 25 psi at wide open
Yeah,
throttle with a brand new impeller, but like normally it's 10, 12, 15, 20 psi. So it's like there's not a lot of pressure there, and that as long as you clean the surface right, you can do it. But when you got walls pitting away, that's like it's you gone
yeah.
too far. Like,
If the head gasket metal ring is only sealing against the cast sleeve, there's
mm-hmm,
not much room for error there. And just like anything else, Aaron, is when did they read the instructions on the JB Weld before they use it? What temperature did they mix it at? Did
mm-hmm,
they clean the surface? And what I like to do is same thing the dentist does. If I'm filling a hole, I want to make sure that I'm not just putting it on the surface. I'm going through that hole to the other side so that
mm-hmm.
even if it breaks loose, it's not going to pop off and end up someplace I don't want it to be.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that's it. I'm surprised something that you didn't say force. You have to deal with a lot of forces up there.
There's not too many left, my friend. Uh,
That's probably for the best.
yeah, Force and Chrysler, it's interesting. So when I was, wow, so this is going back maybe 30 years, I had another machine shop guy where I used to live that I trusted, and he gave an outboard class, and he said, look, I'll teach you how to do this machining at home. And all the motors we worked on were Force and Chrysler and the Tower Power
Mm.
Mercuries and all that stuff, and all the wiring would on the Mercuries would the insulation would fall off of it, and we'd re-sleeve it and heat shrink it and get, you just, when you're young, you have no money, I can get out on the water, you do what you can do, but you pay
Mm-hmm.
the price yourself. It's not like you're doing it for a customer who has to
Right.
trust that this is going to keep him safe out on the water. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have a lot of experiences. I've got a handful of Tower Powers and Force Chrysler experience. And the handful that I have, yeah, my vote is the most unreliable right there. That's, way more than the FIC or the HPDIs or any of that. Those are hands down.
so
And
the
I have limited
force
experiences.
So the force, for the smaller boats, like the 16-foot, the 15-foot boats, those 100-horse Force, the 100-horse Chryslers, the 85s that were, 3 cylinders with one carburetor on them, those were really very basic, simple, but they didn't have a lot of power, but they
Mm-hmm.
ran well. The challenge is you can't really get parts for them anymore.
So let's say someone's got one of these. Let's say they've got a FIC, got an HPDI. They got. I'm not going to say a Force, because if you do have a Force, then I feel I'm sorry for you. Yeah, I'm sure there's going to be you out there that has the Force that are like, hey, that thing's been running great for 40 years. Like,
Yeah.
I get you. I'm not dogging on you, but if someone has one of these engines that what are some things that they can do outside of trying to keep the cooling clean and stuff that they can keep them running longer, or just keep them running?
So if it's a two-stroke, if we can eliminate whatever oil injection system was there, I'm a big fan of. I've always liked the Yamaha's oil injection system, but the Evinrudes, when they were trying to use a vacuum-style pump to pull the oil up from the tank in the boat, it's better just to mix if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with the old OX66s and some of the Mercs that were throttle body style injection. I can add a little bit of oil to my fuel. Sure, it'll smoke a little bit, and I'll foul plugs, and maybe I'll run ring clean or something like a cart decarbonizer through there every once in a while. But I
Mm-hmm.
have less of a problem when I have a failure from my oil injection system. So things like that, making sure that your water pump is working properly and you have full water flow, all the basic maintenance items that you need to do are what's going to give you longevity with any motor that's out there. But you reach that point, like you're saying, where when you have a major failure, let's say a lower unit goes bad and it's an old Force,
Mm-hmm.
timeout. Now maybe you can find someone selling a motor, and maybe the lower unit's good. You pick it up for $100, but what are you going to do? Put seals in it and do $500 worth of work to it for that
Mm-hmm.
motor? It's they're at that point where it's time to make the decision to move on.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Now, if so let's say you're looking for a used outboard, right? What are some things that are like immediate red flags for you that someone's selling, they've got an engine for sale, it's on marketplace. What's something, what a couple things that you would read and be like, whoa, hold on. Like, that doesn't sound right to me, that someone could avoid so they don't buy a basket full of problems.
So number one, first thing, was this motor submerged?
Mm-hmm.
Right after Sandy up here, there was
Mm-hmm.
hundreds of motors that guys brought to me that were seized, and
Oh.
I was like, "How long did you run this?" Just like 2 months. It was running great. Once that rust and corrosion starts inside the crank and the bearings, whether it's a two-stroke or four-stroke, you're not recovering from it. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the number one thing I think about. When you walk up to the motors and you see, corrosion, heavy corrosion. I had a guy he actually had me look at his boat after he already bought it. He was referred to me from another customer of mine. And he said, I just want you to go through it, and see what you think. It's a little Boston Whaler with a 40-horse Yamaha on the back, I think like an 89 motor. And I said, all right, let's take a look, So first I did a compression check. It was good. Started up with the ears, ran fine. I said, okay, let's just look around. And as I kneel down, I'm getting ready to take the plug out of the lower unit, and I see where the mounting is, the lower motor mount that mounts to the swivel. Two of the
Mm-hmm.
bolts are broken. Someone smeared some kind of sealer or JB or something around it. And I go, oh, this is a
Yeah.
problem. I said, well, let's check. And I take the plug out of the lower unit and water comes out. And then as I'm commenting to him that you got the stainless steel prop, I'm not against stainless steel props, but where we go boating in these shallows, I like an aluminum prop. I don't want to bend my prop shaft. So
Yeah.
then I spin the prop and it wobbles back and forth. And I said, okay, I'm out. Meanwhile, he was out on it that day. So some things are visual, obvious, you can pick up on. Some of them are, hidden. If you pull the cover off and you see someone smeared silicone around the head and, around the bait, guys do stuff like that. Well, it runs fine. A little water's coming out. It's not hurting anything,
Yeah. Yeah. It just has an oil trail when you drive it. I mean, that oil's, that's fine. Like, don't worry about that. Like, as he's pouring oil into the jug, like, you gotta keep it running. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, I think anytime submerged for sure is number one. Like if it was sunk, because none of the electronics are going to be reliable, and all that's going to be a problem. Definitely the visual inspection. I'm with you 100% on that. I'm trying to think of something that if I read something in an ad that would be like, just
How
serve
about
it.
motor ran fine when put away?
Yeah. That one, that means that whenever someone's, you're right. I kind of like that one because it's kind of like the way it sounds is like motor ran fine when put away, but then I got the motor out and it won't run now. So that's what you're really saying. You're really saying that you put it away running and when you pull it out, it's not running and you don't want to mess with it no more.
Yeah. So I had a guy. He was Polar's another popular brand too. So he asked me to
Oh yeah.
look at a boat for him. Little, I think it was a 19-foot center console, nice blue hull, and he had a 4-stroke Yamaha on the back of it. And he hadn't run the season before, but he had it up for sale. Ran fine, not this season, but last season everything ran fine. So I, start with my compression test, go through everything. We fired it up sitting there on the trailer, and I said, okay, I detect a little bit of a miss. Maybe it's nothing, but this needs a sea trial. You're going to need to, he wanted 10,000 for the boat. And so I kind of go back to my truck and I'm putting my stuff away and they're negotiating. And my customer comes over and he says, he's willing to take 1,500 off if I buy it right now as is. And I said, look, you can do what you want. I'm not emotionally involved. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. We get, if we're making an emotional decision, that's when we make mistakes, whatever it is that we do. So basic principles. So I said, look, if I was in your shoes, I would say, look, you take it to Marina. If it's a simple fix, I'll give you 10 grand for this boat if it's running after a sea trial, because everything else checked out good. There's no soft spots in the floors or transom is solid. Everything else looks really clean and good. And the guy went back to the guy and he came back to me. He said, no, he said, no, he's going to find somebody else to buy it. 2 weeks later, he called me and he says, guess what? I just bought that boat. I said, oh, did he drop the number to 5 or something for it to be worth it if you needed to do some major work? He said, no, he took it to the marina, paid him $3,800 to clean the fuel system, change the injectors, and do all this work to it. And then we took it out. It ran fine, so I gave him 10 grand for it.
Well, saved him 4 grand, because that 3,800 would have been coming out of his pocket.
That's right.
Do it. Yeah, that's something. The emotional involvement is definitely, especially when you're in that process of you're looking for something, you're in the process of buying or selling. So kind of that red flag is another one there. If someone's like, oh yeah, I'll take 1,500 off the price. It's like, you're only selling it for 2 grand. Why is it now only worth $500? Wait a minute. That's a red flag right there. But someone taking heavy discounts and they're really like, oh, I gotta sell. There's obviously reasons people have to sell things if they need the money. There are those chances but I would say the majority of them are there's a reason they're getting rid of it. And it's not that they just have to have the money tomorrow. Right. So, that's kind of the emotional, you get emotionally attached, especially you're looking for an engine, you're looking for a boat, and you've looked at, say, 20 or 30 boats. You've been looking them online. You've actually went and walked on 2 or 3 of them. You're emotionally I want the process to be over. I want to buy a boat. I'm done scrolling around. You got money burning in your pocket. And that's you're going to get yourself into a situation. What for you, what would be some of the things that would make you walk away from a deal? You know, like you're checking out a boat outside of it being submerged or visually like, you know,
Yeah,
completely trash. Like,
so soft transom, right? If you come
oh
up and
yeah,
I jump on that lower unit and that transom's doing this, hold it, time out. I actually have a video on my channel where I went to look at a guy's Grady White. He got it for free.
Well,
Now
the
you
there's free ain't free. Yeah,
so
free comes with a price.
free boats can be very expensive. So he had twin Ficht motors on it, right? And he paid. It didn't have a trailer, so he paid. I think it was a 26-foot Grady White. He paid someone $400 to bring it from the guy he got it for free from. So paid four
Yeah.
hundred dollars to bring it to him. And the first thing I do is, I pump a little fuel out of the tank into a jar because I want to check that fuel. I do that on every boat. I have my little mason jars up here, and I'll
Uh-huh.
cover it up, put it aside while I'm checking everything else. We'll come back and see what that looks like, and then I jump on that transom and I go, okay, hold it, time out before we do anything else. And because it's not just the transom, it's the stringers that are connected to it, and this boat needs
Uh-huh.
a total restoration. And you know, I said, look, if you want to do a project, I love projects too. That's great, but you're never going to get the value back out of that. It's if you really love this boat and you want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Because
so
especially
those,
when you're talking a twin engine boat, twin engine
you know,
transoms, that's not a $400 in plywood. That's
yeah,
like that's a five, six, seven, $10,000 transom you're gonna have on the back of
yeah.
that boat.
Yep, and you got a lot of epoxy work to do, and you better have the time, the space, and the temperature so that everything goes correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so you'd say would you walk away because of bad fuel?
So it depends on the boat and the deal, right? If the tank, if I have to remove the center console and all the wiring, and the wiring is old and has a lot of issues to get to that tank to take it out, it may
Mm-hmm.
not be worth it. If it's a smaller boat that has an onboard tank, let's say an 18 foot, then someone may want to decide to use deck tanks and just eliminate those, depending on how far they're going out and what type of boating that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it could be a deal breaker for those low end boats because they're usually not worth all of that work. So
Yeah,
I
because
did one. Customer of mine, Ed, I sold him the motor actually, and he was emotionally attached to this boat. It was I think it was a 20-foot Mako center console, and he had proposed to his wife on this boat 14 years
oh
earlier.
wow.
And he had two little girls now, and the boat's been on the side of the house for 14 years. He got rid of the motor. Transom was solid. Everything else was solid. And not really a big boater, so you hadn't had a lot of experience. And I had a deal every time someone bought a rebuilt, because it was a rebuilt 200 horse OX66
Mm.
that I sold him. And I said, look, I go out with you for the first hour to teach you how to break it in. Because I had too many failures with guys not doing proper break-in or had other fuel issues. He swore to me that someone cleaned out the tank. And I said, okay, let's go. So we get out on the water. I start going upstream. He says, well, over there is the bay. And I said, yeah, but over here the water's running this way to get me back to the ramp. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
that's not mechanic sense. That's boating sense, right?
Uh-huh.
So we're up there, and I'm varying the RPM. We're going through, and about 20 minutes in, it just quits. The first thing I do is go over to the fuel water separator, and just brown stuff comes out. I didn't even loosen it up all the way. And
Oh.
I said, let's get your anchor out and let's start throwing it towards shore as we drift back to the dock. So I had to clean out his injectors and all the system and everything. And since he had such a difficult time, I kind of gave him a discounted labor rate and helped him we ripped out the old tank and just put a smaller tank in. He didn't need a 100-gallon tank in that, 40-gallon
Mm-hmm.
was more than enough. And
Right.
he ran that for 10, 15 years. So when you have a good motor, solid motor, and you've got a good tank and you've got good electronics and a solid boat, you could be good for 10 years. And if you look at the cost of that as to buying something new that's 21 foot with a 200 horsepower motor and a trailer, you just saved a lot of money by doing that, even though it was a lot of hassle along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So mainly all kind of structural stuff as far as like walking away from the boat. It's like if you can't replace the tank easily and it's got a fuel problem, like that's a big project that you probably don't want to get into. If the transom is super weak, then depending on the boat, you might have stringers to deal with. That means the deck's coming out of the boat. You're probably not looking to get into that kind of a project.
I've done it. I've done it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What then that same type of question, then if you walk away from the boat, what would be something that you would walk away from the engine for? Like, you know, something that you
Compression.
find on the engine.
So compression check, right? If I have a,
Oh.
especially I've done a lot of two-stroke work in my years. A lot of four-strokes really don't have compression issues unless they've had water in the oil or some other major catastrophe happen, which is
Mm-hmm.
more detrimental than just having a bad cylinder. So, but the two-strokes, if I've got, so I did an evaluation for a couple of guys. They had twin 150 horse Yamahas. It was a broker that was, selling the boat, and I get down there with my compression. I asked the guy, I said, "Is it okay if I pull the covers off and do a compression check?" He said, "Yes." Take the covers off. I put my hand on the flywheel to get ready to pop the spark plug wire off, and the engine's already warm. And I said, "So did you warm these up?" He said, "Well, I want it all warmed up, ready to go for you guys." And I said, "Okay, so we're not doing a cold compression check. We're doing a warm, but we'll see what we got." And I had 90
Mm-hmm.
psi on one cylinder on one engine. And I said, "Look, you're not going to rebuild just one engine and have one rebuilt, one not. You can do whatever you want,
Mm-hmm.
but took the boat out, wouldn't hardly get up on plane. We're like 4,200 RPM, and we're trying to get up on plane, and it's just And I said, "Look, you don't want that." Now, if a guy comes and drops his number in half because he's got to get rid of it, nobody wants it, then maybe it
Yeah.
might be worth it to buy it to do that. So compression, if lower unit and power tilt and trim are both failing, those are two major components, as you know, that are going to be very costly, especially if you're not doing the work yourself. If you're paying a
Mm-hmm.
marina for these things, you could spend another $3,000 on those, unless the guy's dropping his number a lot. If I go in and I see new seals on that power tilt and trim, first thing I do is take my gloves off and rub my hand around those shafts to see, and there's nicks in those shafts, they're just going to start leaking again,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going
Yep.
to have nothing but hassles.
Yeah, that's almost could be like a pretty good negotiating tactic is to go and say you look at a boat and you like the boat. Tank's all good. Let's say it's a 20-year-old boat. Transom's good, floor's good, the boat's pretty clean, but the engine's very, very questionable. And like the guy that had the fix, like he can't sell the boat because no one wants the boat with the fix on it. The boat's a really good boat, but yet no one wants these engines. So anybody that buys it's going to be taking the engines off and replacing them. So you could probably work yourself a pretty good deal when it comes to, buying an older, good used boat and then just repowering it. Find you some used engines or
Yep.
do a brand new engine.
I agree with you, Aaron, and that's what people need to do is not get so emotional that they're buying something they're gonna try and keep something running that they shouldn't. That's gonna cost them more and more issues. So what I was always told, I had a really good parts guy when I was 18 years old at this place, DNR Boats up in Greenbrook, New Jersey. This guy Mike Garza, he's still around. I still call him from time to time. He works for Mac Boring now, I think, and
Hmm.
he's just one of these guys. You know some of those guys. You call them. They have all the inside advice. They just remember that stuff. He told me years ago, a boat with a motor that's no good has no value,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
true.
simple because we're not talking about looking as mechanics. I can buy a motor and put it on there used and know that it's good and run it. But the average person who's going to come, if we're looking at the true value, you're going to invest too much into that boat for it to be worth it to purchase when you can buy a running boat for $5,000 more.
Yeah, because someone that's selling it, obviously, whenever it's yours and you're selling it, if your engine's on the edge or just undesirable, they're comparing, it's like anything else that you sell. You're selling a house, you're selling your car, you're selling whatever you're selling. Pull out your phone. It's 2025. You go Google, you look up what it is, oh, I can find 10 of these for this price. Well, yeah, but all 10 of those boats have Yamaha 250s on them at 4 strokes. They're all 50 grand. You want 45 grand and you got the Evinrude fix on the back of that thing. And like, it's like yours isn't really worth, it's not the same comparison.
Yeah.
And to the average person, like you said, like for me or you or anybody that's, mechanically inclined or been doing it for a while, it's not a very big deal to us. We're going to use it as a tactic. But if you're like, just trying to get in it to use the boat and like, you're not that savvy with it, that doesn't throw red flags in your mind because to them, Yamaha, Evinrude, it's an outboard. What's the difference? There's not a difference
I,
there.
and for guys like you and I, we're trying to give good advice to help somebody out in this situation, and we want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure. So one of the things I just thought of when we talked about walking away from a motor, if you have a Yamaha, what I love about the Yamaha is that gray or bluish paint on the engine block, because if it's gold, that sucker was overheated and you don't
Mm-hmm.
want that motor. It's never going to work properly again. I've had them tried to rebuild them before, and I've never been able to get a properly running motor that was overheated that badly. Now on the Mercs that are black, it's a little difficult to see that, but that was one of the things that I just thought of.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to know about visually because you can see that on other sections of the engine too. If you walk up and you see flaky paint that's like, rippled, if you see discolored paint, if you see cracked like spider cracked paint, like that's a visual sign of this thing's been getting hot. Same thing for the lower units. You can look at lower units and see the same thing where, you know, that's been getting hot. Like that thing should not have been getting that hot.
Yeah. Did
So
did someone use a torch to take that apart, or did it end
yeah,
up like
yeah.
that in the water, for crying out loud?
Yeah, yeah. So that is a good point. I didn't put that together. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that one up there because yeah, and that is something that you don't think about, especially if you aren't dealing with it every day. But for somebody, if you're looking for a boat, I think that that's something that you should probably do is when like Keith is saying, you don't get emotionally attached to the boat or the process. Don't get emotionally attached to the entire process because the whole process might take you weeks, months. You don't know, but it's going to be way better for your wallet if you're not emotionally attached and just trying to jump the gun and buy something. But if you find a boat you like the whatever, you pick your brand, you pick your Mako, your Grady White, whatever, and you see that all these boats are 50 grand and they all have Yamahas, but then there's the one that has the Evinrudes or they have, something else. Just take a step back and figure out, well, what's the difference between these two engine brands and these models? Because there could be a big 5, 10, $15,000 difference in
Yep.
just that motor being on the back of that boat.
And one of the things that I think about too is, especially with a lot of the older Evinrude two strokes, and I'd love to get your opinion on the CDI ignition parts. My personal experience is that they don't always work well with the OEM ignition parts. I've had guys spend thousands over the years where I needed a power pack. They bought the CDI power pack, put it on, it ran fine 2, 3 times, and then they couldn't get it to run right. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with it, take it to another place. Oh, it was a trigger base. They pop the flywheel off, put a new trigger base on it. It ran fine 2, 3 times, and then it doesn't run right again.
Mm-hmm.
So what I used to do is when I picked up these motors for $100 or blown, I would take the whole OEM, the stator, the trigger base, the whole electronics package off of it. And I would tell guys, look, here's the problem you've been having. You've spent how much over the years if you total this up? Close to $5,000 on this 150 horsepower motor. I don't want you to pay me another $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
I have these used parts. I'm going to come to you. We're going to take all of your parts off. I get all your old parts. I put all of the new on. I'm going to charge you like $500 for the parts and $500 for labor. And if this doesn't work, you are done. Don't put any more into this. And I'm just being honest with you because you're rolling the dice one last time.
Mm-hmm.
This is the only way I can figure to help you. to make sure. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the guys love me. It worked great for many years to come after that. And all those CDI parts, I had guys, you want to buy it from me? Well, I'll give me $20 for it. What's it worth? I don't know. So I don't know. Has that been your experience with CDI, or you don't really do a lot of the Evinrude?
I haven't for a while. I mean, when I was first up until probably like maybe like 2016, 2017, that's about when it was like down here, most of those engines all faded away. Like
Yeah,
exact situation. You know, I've always been, I mean, I say it all the time. Evinrude to me has always been a 50-50 brand and a 50-50 engine. 50% of the people that own them have zero problems. They don't even service them. They just turn the key, run, and they treat them like crap, and they run and they start all the time and no issues. And then the other 50% of the time, they service them, maintain them, do everything by the T, and the thing will not start every other time they get on the boat because of miscellaneous stuff. And then you get into the even older ones where, like you said, you got power packs, stators, timer bases, the CDI units. And yeah, you can buy all those parts from CDI 50% of the time, no problems. Put on a new tire base, you're good to go for 3-4 years and nothing. The other 50% of the time, 3 weeks later, you got the same problem, and now you're chasing down a timer base, you're chasing down a stator, you're chasing down another component in the system because it's the electronics and it's the timing of the engine that throws it off, and everything gets all whacked out. And yeah,
I
I
agree.
I think it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's a bad thing because it goes back to you're chasing, you're chasing to try and keep this engine running. Yeah, all of us can get the thing to run. Like you bring it to me, for sure. I'll put this on there. I'll put that on there. I can make the engine run. It's a 2-stroke. It's got, spark. It's got fuel. It's got air. I got oil to it. I can make it run. But you're going to take it away in 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road when the thing doesn't start again because
Yeah,
some other problem. You're not going to be happy with me.
right.
And so, for that reason, we kind of like, we don't, I don't want to work on that. You're not going to be
No,
happy. I'm not going to be happy.
yep.
It's
So I
time for you to
couldn't.
start looking for a new
Yeah,
engine.
I couldn't agree with you more, but understand that I think there's a different concept here, which is why I really liked your videos and wanted to do this podcast with you, is because you're not just saying, don't buy this, don't buy that. Like you see so many people online, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, but they never explain why. Where does that knowledge come from? Does it come from personal experience?
Mm-hmm.
So what experiences? It's from the experiences that we have and also from the people that we've known for years. I've been blessed
Mm-hmm.
that so many of these old timers, parts guys, machine shop guys that just I would go to and they would share with me. And you know as well as I do, it's difficult to find good mechanics. I had these
Yeah.
marinas that I was in the back. They would call me, "Hey, I'm having a problem with this Yamaha. My guys are having a problem. Can you come help them out?" I do this as a side business, and I'm over
Mm-hmm.
there going, well, did you check this? I'm just going through the basics and researching things. So it's interesting. It's from those experiences that I think are more valuable in the long run. And that's what we're trying to help people understand. It's not don't do this because I said so. It's because here's our experience and what we've learned over the years. And we'd hate to
Mm-hmm.
have you fall into the same traps that we did, you know.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
these Evinrudes, the 60-degree motors, even some of the larger 200 horsepower with the bigger blocks. I am really getting away from rebuilding those if guys want to. If you find a motor with good compression, let's see if we can get it running, or maybe use some old OEM parts that you can buy to get it running. But that's about it. I still love that old V4. I have a 90 horsepower Johnson here. That's what this lower unit over here is out of, and it has good compression. Started right up. I bought it for 150 bucks because the guy he couldn't shift it, and the only problem was is that those double O rings where the shift shaft goes in gets all that corrosion around it and squeezes
Mm-hmm.
that shift shaft that he screwed up his controls and everything trying to shift it and
Oh,
got rid of the motor.
yep.
So that can be a good motor I could sell for maybe 1,000 or 1,500 and get somebody out on the water because those were good reliable motors.
The value of those engines drop dramatically, and that's what I try to steer people away from that too, because I saw the other day on, I think it was Facebook Marketplace or somewhere. I'm always looking at stuff, and I saw, I think it was two like 2018 300 Evinrude G2s for like $2,800 for both of them. It's like there's a reason that these engines, being 7 years old or whatever they were, are only a couple grand. Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, this is a $15,000-$20,000 engine. Like,
Yeah.
why is it $1,500? Like, well, that's because there's problems with them, and you can make them run. But back to you being in New Jersey, if you only have 8 to 10 times to use your boat, most boats are extremely expensive. I mean, like, yeah, you can get out on the water for 10 grand, but these days a 23-foot boat is $100,000. Like,
Yep.
people are spending $300,000 on a bass boat. So I mean, it's like boats are ridiculously expensive. Like, but at 50, 60, 70, $100,000, you've got 100 grand sitting here that you only get to use 8 to 10 times. Why
Yeah.
in the world would you want something that every year you're not sure am I going to get 4 times on the water? Am I going to get 6 times on the water? Am I going to get all 8 to 10 times on the water? Like, time is more valuable to a lot of people than, I think people try and save that money on like not spending, not doing maintenance, not doing this. You're saving yourself. Let's say you save yourself $1,000, but yet you lose 50% of the enjoyment of the boat that you've got you got $100,000 boat here.
Yeah.
To save $1,000, you're going to lose 50% of the enjoyment of owning that. Like, that's never made sense to me.
Yeah, I rebuilt a buddy of mine, Bill. I rebuilt. We became really, really good friends. I sold him a 250 horse Yamaha OX66 that I had rebuilt. It's probably 12 years ago now. He said, I said to him, now we got to go out and break this in. Bring your boat. I'll help you mount it. He said, no, I'm going to have my marina do it. I want to make sure it's set right. And I was like, well, set right? It's a 25-inch shaft. He had a 300 horse HPDI that he spent way too much money on, and I took in on a trade there was a 30-inch with a jack plate, and the transom was good. So I said, okay, his marina took it. 2 days later, he calls me, the engine's knocking. So I talked to the marina guy, and he says, oh, I was sitting here idling at the dock for like an hour, ran fine until the guy got up on plane, then it started knocking. And I'm like, you're not supposed to idle a fresh motor, number one. Number two, you're supposed to vary the RPM. I've been breaking motors in for years. Okay, I'm not going to get into a pissing match with the guy. So I made a deal with him.
Argue that.
So actually, this is actually the piston that came out of it. So I made a deal with him. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll rebuild it labor free. You pay for the. I said, I'll even let you. We'll take it to a machine shop. Let them do the machining this time. I said, but you got something else going on, and we got to break this in together. So I went, we broke it in. I probably spent 2-3 hours out on the water with him, ran it all season. End of the season, same lower piston on the Yamaha with the same problem. So I had another block already rebuilt. At that point, I had blocks all over the place here, just ready to go, because guys would just want to get on the water. Yeah, $3,000, I'll get you on the water. We'll change out your block,
Yep.
And so I said, we got to figure out what's going on. So what I do, pump a little fuel into a jar, set it aside. By the time we're done, there's that much water in the bottom of it. That fuel rail on the OX66, all the water goes down the bottom to that lower cylinder when it sits for a period of time. He got his tank squared away, and his fuel fill was cracked. So every time it rained, it was running down into the tank.
Oh.
So he ran that OX66, the second one now, for 10 years. Loved it. Didn't want to move on from it, but he's like, look, it's, now it's a 1999 motor, and I want a 4-stroke.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We actually sold the 250 to another guy, and he's got the 4-stroke on there now. But he lives on the water, on a lagoon. So him and his kids, they're out every other day out on the boat all year long.
Yeah, that's the savings in the fuel going over to the 4-stroke's going to be it. But the water is a serious thing that it does, like you said, he ran the whole season, but it will take its toll. I've seen same thing, similar, where you got a problem with your fuel tank. You're getting a little bit of fuel in there at a time. So it's just a little bit of fuel, or a little bit of oil, But over time, over a season, that brings its own problems. Where I saw a guy, same thing. He bought two brand new engines, 150s, 4 strokes, put them on the boat. Hey, you got a problem with your fuel tank. Like you've got two fuel tanks on the boat. You need to only use one. So, we did the same thing. We checked everything out. We're like, hey, we're going to put these engines on here, but your fuel tank is bad. You need to fix this. We're going to run you on this tank so you can go use your boat, all that, but don't switch the tanks. He would consistently switch to the tanks, and then like he wasn't blowing up the engines, but he was going through fuel pumps because it would suck that water through and it would rust out his fuel tanks. And next thing you know, he's got injector problems. He's got, new FSMs and all his problems. And he was always wanting to do, oh, it's warranty. I got a brand new engine. And it's like, yeah, but you're running water through it. So
you can't
that
make
is
it up.
something.
You can't make it up.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Keith, this has been great. I appreciate you coming on here. Anybody who wants to check him out, Outboard Dad on YouTube, check him out. But that's been great.
Appreciate you, Aaron. Thanks for inviting me. Would love to do this again more and more. Had fun talking with you and hope that we can help everybody out there have a better boating experience.